The ocean roared with a force unseen in decades as the tsunami struck the coast with fury. Villages vanished in moments, leaving behind silence broken only by the rush of water. Among the chaos, herds of elephants found themselves trapped with no clear escape route. Locals watched in shock as the giants struggled against waves that swallowed the land. The sheer size of the animals could not withstand the relentless power of the sea. Some were swept into deep waters while others clung to trees and broken structures. Rescuers braved the dangerous currents to try and guide the elephants to safety. Stories of bravery emerged as people risked their lives to save both humans and animals. The tragedy left a scar on the hearts of those who witnessed the disaster unfold. It became a reminder of nature's unpredictable power and the bond between species. 1. The calm before the wave. The morning sun rose over the coastline, bringing a quiet peace to the island's wild expanse. Fishermen prepared their nets as the tide moved gently beneath the glittering surface. The elephants grazed lazily near the mangroves, unaware of the dangers still far beyond sight. Birds sang in the forest canopy, filling the air with nature's ordinary vibrant symphony. No one imagined the ocean beyond the horizon was already stirring with deadly force. The waves were born from a violent quake deep beneath the seabed far to the west. Seismic energy moved faster than a bird in flight, racing through the deep waters. The water above surged outward, carrying the invisible power of destruction with it. Animals far away sensed the coming change, but the humans remained blissfully unaware. The elephants moved slowly inland, only to return when the breeze calmed once again. Unseen forces were aligning to create the disaster that would test life's fragile balance. The villagers traded goods along the shore, still wrapped in the rhythm of daily life. Children chased each other in the sand, leaving fleeting trails of laughter behind them. The jungle rustled in the wind and the tall grass bent toward the eastern mountains. The air was warm but carried no hint of the terror hidden just over the horizon's edge. Each moment brought the unstoppable surge closer, but no one could see it coming yet. The peaceful setting masked the distant chaos growing with every passing heartbeat. Elephants shook their ears gently and swayed as they drank from a shallow pool. The stillness would soon be shattered by the roar of water and the cries of survival. This was the final hour before the tsunami would forever change the island's story. 2. The first signs of trouble. The ocean began to pull back, leaving fish flopping on the exposed wet sand. Children laughed, thinking it was a strange and exciting trick of nature's tide. Fishermen shouted warnings, recalling tales of waves that follow such a retreat. The elephants lifted their trunks high, sniffing the shifting scent of salt and fear. Their great ears fanned wide as they rumbled a low call to the rest of the herd. Birds erupted from the trees, flying inland as though chased by an unseen predator. Villagers felt an unease settle in the air, though no danger could yet be seen. The sea kept retreating further, exposing coral that had not seen light in decades. Small crabs scurried across the newly bare seabed, searching for safe places to hide. Elders remembered the signs told in old stories of the sea's sudden hunger. The elephants shuffled nervously, stamping their feet into the soft, damp ground. Men ran to gather their families, urging them toward the safety of higher ground. The sun glared on the wet sand, blinding those who tried to scan the horizon. The retreating water carried a hollow silence that was more frightening than noise. In the forest, monkeys screamed as if warning of something too large to escape. Dogs barked frantically, tugging at ropes to flee toward the inland hills. The villagers' unease began to swell into panic as the ocean lay strangely bare. A long, deep vibration rolled through the ground, shaking water in clay pots. The elephants moved slowly but with purpose toward the rising forest slopes. This was the beginning of nature's warning before the fury of the wave arrived. 3. The wall of water appears. A thin, dark line formed at the horizon, growing taller with every passing moment. At first it looked like a ridge of storm clouds lying low across the sea. Fishermen knew it was not clouds but water rising in a monstrous formation. The elephants trumpeted loudly, their calls echoing into the thick forest canopy. The line of water turned into a towering wall, glinting under the afternoon sun. Wind rushed ahead of it, carrying the roar of its tremendous approaching weight. Villagers froze, staring at the unstoppable force rolling toward them at great speed. Mothers clutched their children and fathers pulled them toward the inland path. Some men still ran to save boats, though the water was now too close to outrun. The elephants surged forward, their massive feet pounding the soft jungle floor. Leaves and branches shook violently as animals fled deeper into the hills. The roar grew louder, drowning out the cries of people shouting to each other. The sun's light fractured into flashes as the waves' peak towered above the shore. The first shadow of the wave fell over the sand, cooling it instantly. Dogs howled and chickens scattered in a flurry of feathers and dust. The elephants moved faster, sensing the urgency of the moment's danger. Water sprayed high into the air at the wave's leading edge like exploding glass. The villagers who lingered could see fish tumbling in the crest of the wave. The sea had risen up to claim the land and all life upon its edge. It was now only moments before the island's peace would be shattered. 4. The unusual behavior before the disaster. Before the tsunami struck, the elephants showed an unusual restlessness and agitation. Their keepers noticed them lifting their trunks to the wind as if sensing danger far away. Some elephants refused to eat or drink and kept shifting from one foot to another nervously. They began trumpeting loudly, creating an eerie sound that echoed through the valley nearby. Older handlers whispered that elephants can sense vibrations long before humans can react. The herd gathered together in tight formation as if preparing for an urgent coordinated move. One large matriarch stomped the ground and led the others toward the higher inland hills. Even the youngest calves followed without resistance, as if they understood the silent warning. The scene was both strange and unsettling, as the elephants usually followed a set daily routine. Villagers paused their work to watch the animals move with such determined precision. These early signs went unrecognized as a disaster warning until it was already too late to flee. The handlers thought the elephants were simply responding to a storm approaching the coast. In truth, they were reacting to deep seismic vibrations from the ocean floor miles away. Scientists later confirmed elephants detect low-frequency sounds before humans ever notice. This ancient survival instinct had saved herds countless times over generations in the wild. The elephant's behavior became one of the earliest warnings that something massive was coming. Sadly, very few people acted on this sign before the tsunami finally struck without mercy. Those who followed the elephants toward the hills survived the destruction that followed. The strange movements of that day are still remembered as a silent call of nature's alarm. It remains a reminder to respect the instincts of animals who share our fragile planet. 5. The first wave of panic. The ground trembled lightly before the tsunami and the elephants reacted with urgent cries. The handlers shouted for people to stay calm, but the animals' fear was spreading quickly. Birds took to the skies in large flocks, adding to the sense of something deeply unnatural. Elephants began moving faster away from the shoreline, kicking up dust with heavy strides. Some villagers followed while others stood confused, not seeing the danger that was coming. The distant roar of the ocean grew louder until it sounded like a passing freight train. Panic took hold when people saw the water pulling away from the shore in a strange retreat. Children screamed as fish flopped helplessly on the exposed seabed now visible for miles. The elephants trumpeted in unison, urging each other further inland as fast as possible. Even the largest males did not stop to look back but pushed forward without hesitation. Those who hesitated at the shore did not realize the danger until the first wave appeared. It rose like a towering wall of water, blocking out the horizon and rushing toward the coast. The elephants and the villagers who followed them were already halfway up the hills. Behind them, the wave smashed into the coastline, destroying everything in its path instantly. The power of the water uprooted trees and carried away boats, houses, and entire vehicles. The sound was deafening, drowning out screams and shouts for help from the shoreline. The panic gave way to stunned silence as survivors watched the devastation unfold. The elephants stopped only when they reached a safe high point far from the rushing sea. It was there that people realized the animals had been right to flee without looking back. The first wave had claimed everything it touched, leaving only wreckage and silence behind. 6. The escape to the hills. As the tsunami roared and the elephants pushed ahead, leading the way to the inland hills. Handlers ran alongside, trying to keep up with the speed and power of the fleeing herd. The steep slopes were difficult to climb, but the elephants showed no sign of slowing down. Villagers clung to trees and rocks, pulling themselves upward with sheer desperation. Some elderly residents struggled to keep pace and were lifted by younger rescuers. The elephants created a natural path, breaking branches and clearing obstacles ahead. Their massive weight made deep impressions in the earth, guiding those behind them. The air was filled with the sound of crashing waves mixed with heavy breathing and cries. Each step away from the shore felt like one more chance at life in the face of destruction. Children were carried in the arms of parents as they scrambled up toward higher ground. The elephants did not stop until they reached a plateau with a clear view of the coast. From there, survivors could see the tsunami swallowing the villages they had just left. Tears streamed down faces as they realized how close they had come to losing everything. Some dropped to their knees in prayer while others clung to the elephants in gratitude. The hills became a place of safety where the air was filled with relief instead of fear. The elephants stood calmly now, as if knowing the danger had passed for the moment. In that stillness, people began to grasp the enormity of what had just happened below. They had escaped only because they trusted the instincts of the great animals beside them. That climb became a story retold for years as a testament to survival through unity. The hills had saved them just as much as the elephants who had led them there. 7. The destruction below. From the safety of the hills, survivors watched the ocean consume the coastline. The first wave had destroyed most structures, leaving a muddy wasteland in its wake. Palm trees were snapped like twigs and fishing boats were scattered miles inland. Houses that had stood for generations were reduced to piles of shattered wood and debris. The elephants stood side by side, their eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding below them. A second wave came crashing in, sweeping away anything still left standing on the shore. The sheer force of the water lifted cars like toys and smashed them into concrete walls. Fields where children once played were buried under dark swirling floodwaters. The smell of salt and destruction hung heavy in the humid air over the devastated land. People held each other tightly, unable to look away from the scene of utter ruin. The waves carried away personal belongings, turning memories into drifting wreckage. Among the debris floated fishing nets, broken furniture and shattered cooking pots. The survivors realized the lives of many friends and family had been lost in moments. The elephants shifted uneasily, sensing the sorrow and fear in the air around them. Even from high above, the sound of crashing water echoed like rolling thunder. Each wave seemed determined to erase every trace of human life from the coastline. Only the tallest trees remained visible above the churning waters of the bay. It became clear that returning to the shore would be impossible for many days ahead. The destruction below served as a harsh lesson in the unstoppable power of nature. From that moment, the survivors vowed never to ignore the warning signs again. 8. The night after the tsunami. As the sun set, the survivors prepared to spend the night in the hills with the elephants. The air was cool but heavy with the scent of the sea and the dampness of the flood below. People gathered in small groups, sharing blankets, food and water with each other. The elephants formed a loose circle around the people, offering a sense of protection. Fires were lit to keep away the chill and to give light in the surrounding darkness. Some villagers sang softly to calm the children who still shook from the day's events. The sound of the distant waves continued all night like an endless roar in the distance. No one dared sleep deeply, fearing another surge might rise from the ocean without warning. The elephants stood watch, occasionally shifting but never moving far from the group. Handlers stroked their trunks, speaking to them in low, soothing tones of reassurance. Some people prayed aloud, giving thanks for being spared and asking for the strength ahead. Others stared silently into the flames, lost in thoughts of those who had not survived. The stars shone brightly overhead in contrast to the devastation that lay below. Occasional cries from the elephants seemed to echo the grief of the gathered survivors. The night was long and filled with moments of both fear and deep reflection. Each person understood that their lives had been forever changed by the day's events. The bond between the humans and elephants felt stronger than it had ever been before. They had survived together and now shared a silent promise to protect one another. Morning would bring the challenge of finding food, shelter, and the path back to the shore. But that night was remembered as one of unity between man and animal in the face of disaster. 9. The search for survivors. When dawn broke, the survivors began looking for others who might have escaped the waves. Groups formed and slowly descended from the hills into the outer edges of the devastation. The elephants moved with them, carefully stepping over fallen trees and wreckage. The smell of salt and mud grew stronger as they approached the ruined coastline. Shouts were made to call out for any who might be trapped or hiding in the debris. Some faint cries answered back, bringing both hope and urgency to the rescue efforts. Men and women dug through piles of wood and stone with bare hands to free survivors. The elephants used their trunks to lift heavier beams and move large obstacles aside. In some cases, they pulled people from under collapsed roofs with astonishing gentleness. Each rescue brought tears and relief, though the losses remained painfully heavy. Injured survivors were carried back to the safety of the hills for treatment and rest. The rescued spoke of being swept inland and clinging to trees to survive the night. Some had lost everything yet clung to life with remarkable courage and willpower. The elephants seemed to sense who needed the most help and stayed close to the injured. Handlers coordinated with villagers to ensure no area was left unchecked. The search continued for hours until exhaustion forced everyone to stop and regroup. Those still missing were honored with silent prayers as the day drew to a close. The work of recovery had only just begun and the need for unity was greater than ever. In those moments, the elephants were not just animals but partners in the struggle to survive. The rescue effort became a lasting symbol of cooperation between humans and nature. 10. The weeks of recovery. In the weeks after the tsunami, survivors began the slow process of rebuilding their lives. Temporary shelters were set up in the hills using salvaged wood and donated materials. The elephants helped transport heavy loads of supplies from nearby towns inland. Every trip down to the shore brought fresh reminders of the disaster's enormous toll. Boats lay broken far from the water and entire streets had disappeared under mud. Farmers faced ruined fields filled with salt water that would take months to restore. Children played quietly near the shelters, their laughter still hesitant and rare. The elephants continued to patrol the area as if guarding the fragile new settlement. Aid arrived from other villages bringing food, medicine and comforting human presence. Teams worked to clear debris and reopen paths blocked by fallen trees and wreckage. The survivors shared stories at night, finding strength in their shared experience. Every life saved felt like a victory against the power that had tried to destroy them. People learned to value each day and to trust the instincts of the animals around them. The community began to plant new trees and rebuild homes on higher, safer ground. Fishing boats were repaired and pushed back to sea to restore the village's livelihood. Festivals were postponed, but promises were made to celebrate survival in the future. Children grew up hearing the story of the elephants that had led their families to safety. The tsunami scars remained visible, but hope slowly returned to the hearts of the people. Recovery was not easy, but it was made possible by unity, resilience and determination. The bond formed that day between man and elephant would never be forgotten. 11. The search for survivors. Rescuers moved through debris-filled landscapes looking for signs of life among the wreckage. Elephants were not just lost but feared to be trapped under fallen trees and collapsed shelters. Men and women called out into the silence, their voices echoing through the devastated forest. Search teams had to navigate dangerous waters where sharp debris floated with hidden hazards. They followed tracks in the mud, hoping to find a path where elephants might have escaped too. Some used dogs trained to track animals, hoping scents could lead to surviving elephants. Every hour without finding survivors felt heavier on the shoulders of exhausted rescue crews. Helicopters scanned from above, but thick jungle and fog made spotting animals difficult. Some elephants were found alive but injured, their bodies scarred by the wave's fierce force. Veterinarians treated wounds on the spot using whatever limited supplies they could carry in. Temporary shelters were set up near rescue zones to provide care for found survivors quickly. Rescuers had to feed injured elephants by hand as many were too weak to eat on their own. The sound of a rescued elephant trumpeting brought relief and hope to everyone around. Not all searches ended with good news, as many tracks led only to washed-away paths. The emotional toll weighed heavy, but teams pushed on, refusing to leave without searching all. Communities joined in the rescue, providing manpower and food for those on the search lines. Children gathered near the rescue camps hoping to see elephants safe and alive again. Rescue leaders coordinated efforts day and night, barely sleeping to cover every possible lead. Finding even one more survivor was enough to drive them forward despite exhaustion and fear. The search became a symbol of unity where every person's effort counted toward the mission. 12. The silent forests. After the wave, the once lively forest was quiet, its normal sounds replaced by heavy silence. Birdsong had vanished and the rustle of elephant herds through the undergrowth was gone. The absence of sound made the loss even more real and deeply unsettling for locals nearby. Where trumpets once echoed, there was now only the wind passing through broken trees. Small animals too had disappeared, swept away or forced into hiding far from the coast. Without the elephants, trails through the forest began to close with overgrowth and debris. Hunters and guides said the silence felt unnatural, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Old watering holes lay abandoned with no footprints marking the muddy edges anymore. Even insects seemed fewer, as if the wave had erased not just lives but entire rhythms. The silence made the search harder as rescuers relied on animal calls to track survivors. Local elders said the quiet reminded them of old storms that left the forest empty for years. The missing elephants also changed the ecosystem, affecting plants they once cleared by grazing. Without elephant, seeds that depended on their travel for spreading remained stuck in one place. Predators that hunted near elephant paths had to move on to new territories or risk starving. The forest was no longer just damaged, it was altered in ways that could take decades to heal. Many feared the silence meant the elephants might never return to their former home range. The first sign of life after weeks was a lone bird call that broke the heavy stillness briefly. People gathered quietly to listen, each sound now precious in the empty forest atmosphere. It was a haunting reminder of how deeply that tsunami had changed nature's balance here. The silent forest became a symbol of loss that words alone could never truly describe. 13. The cultural loss. For generations, elephants had been part of ceremonies, festivals and everyday rural life here. They were painted, adorned and honored during traditional events marking seasonal changes. The tsunami not only destroyed the herds but also disrupted cultural heritage tied to them. Without elephants, parades felt hollow and temple festivals lost a central living symbol. Elders wept as they told children stories of elephant ancestors they might never see again. Artisans who carved elephant figures now worked without recent memories to inspire them. Folk songs that celebrated elephant journeys sounded bittersweet in the aftermath. Some feared the next generation would know elephants only from photographs and tales. Temples that housed ceremonial elephants now stood with empty courtyards and stalls. Communities tried to honor the lost animals with prayers, incense, and memorial altars. In some villages, bells were rung daily to call the spirits of the elephants home in peace. Traditional healers used to gather herbs from trails elephants kept open now blocked. The absence left gaps in both spiritual and practical aspects of local living. Festivals adapted with symbolic representations, but the loss still felt deeply personal. Children painted elephants on walls as a way to keep their memory alive in the streets. Poets wrote verses comparing the wave to a thief that stole both life and tradition. Some carved wooden elephants to place in homes, believing it would bring protection. Even wedding ceremonies changed as elephant blessings were part of ancient customs. The cultural wound was as deep as the physical one, and healing it would take decades. For many, the elephants were not just animals, they were family woven into daily life. 14. The orphaned calves. In the days after the wave, rescuers began finding calves wandering alone without their herds. These young elephants were confused, calling out for mothers that would never return. Some were found near the ruins of villages, having followed familiar human voices for help. Rescuers had to approach carefully to avoid frightening the already traumatized animals. Feeding them was a challenge as milk substitutes were hard to source in disaster zones. Local farmers offered goat milk until proper formula could be brought from faraway cities. The calves formed bonds with their caretakers, often refusing to leave their sides. Some slept standing, pressed close to rescuers as if seeking warmth and security. Veterinarians treated cuts, bruises, and infections caused by debris in the floodwaters. The emotional care was just as important as the physical healing for these young survivors. Orphan calves were moved to protected enclosures to prevent injury from predators. They learned to follow human commands slowly as trust replaced their initial fear. Caretakers sang softly to soothe them, mimicking the low rumbles of elephant herds. Older rescued elephants sometimes acted as guardians for the smallest calves. This adoption by older elephants gave the calves a sense of herd safety again. Training focused on keeping them strong until they could survive in the wild later. Rescue centers documented each calf's journey, hoping to reintroduce them one day. Naming ceremonies were held so each orphan would have an identity and be remembered. Every calf saved represented hope that the herd's story was not yet finished. Their survival was proof that even after the tsunami there was still a future to protect. 15. Rescue teams search for survivors. Rescue teams moved swiftly through the flooded lands, searching for signs of life and calling out loudly. Every step they took was cautious as the unstable ground threatened to pull them down without warning. Their priority was to locate trapped elephants and humans who were struggling to hold on to anything. The search was dangerous, with debris floating everywhere and the water hiding unseen obstacles below. Rescuers worked in shifts, never stopping even when exhaustion and hunger began to take over their will. They used ropes and boats to reach areas where normal movement was impossible due to the strong currents. Every cry or sound made them rush in hope that it might be someone in desperate need of help to survive. The team faced moments where they saved an animal only to see another in distress nearby needing aid. Their bravery and quick decisions ensured many lives were pulled back from the brink of certain disaster. 16. The struggle of separated herds. Herds of elephants were split apart as the massive waves broke their paths and pushed them far away. Young calves cried for their mothers, but the chaos of the water made it impossible to hear them clearly. Some adults tried to swim toward the younger ones, but the strong currents kept forcing them backward. The separation caused stress and panic, making survival even harder for elephants already exhausted. Older elephants tried guiding the group, but constant obstacles kept slowing their efforts to regroup. Many wandered into unfamiliar territory where finding food or safe shelter was a serious challenge. The bonds of the herd were tested as some members vanished entirely into the deep swirling waters. Survivors faced an uncertain journey to reunite with their missing family members scattered by waves. This disconnection changed their behavior, making them more cautious and less trusting of open spaces. 17. Damage to natural habitat. The tsunami did not only harm living creatures but also destroy the land they called home forever. Forests that once offered food and safety were flattened, leaving bare soil and scattered broken trunks. Rivers were blocked by debris, changing their course and making water harder to find for the survivors. The destruction of plants reduced the supply of leaves, fruits, and roots needed for elephant nutrition. Mudslides covered areas where herds usually rested, turning them into dangerous, unstable sinking spots. Freshwater ponds were filled with seawater, making them undrinkable and unfit for any animal's survival. The loss of dense cover left elephants exposed to predators and extreme weather without any protection. Paths that once connected feeding grounds became impassable due to fallen trees and deep water pools. Restoring these areas would take years, leaving the elephants in a constant struggle for food and shelter. 18. Human efforts to provide aid. Local communities came together to provide food, water, and shelter for elephants after the disaster. Volunteers brought large amounts of bananas, sugarcane, and water tanks to keep the herds alive daily. Special rescue groups built temporary enclosures to protect the animals from further harm and stress. Medical teams treated wounds, infections, and exhaustion caused by days of swimming in rough waters. Authorities organized safe routes for elephants to move back towards surviving natural feeding grounds. People patrolled dangerous areas to guide lost animals away from unstable terrain or polluted water. Donations poured in from across the world to fund the ongoing relief and long-term care for the herds. Wildlife experts advised on how to restore feeding areas while keeping the elephants safe from harm. The joint effort between humans and wildlife organizations gave the elephants a chance at recovery. By nightfall, the landscape was altered forever, a solemn reminder of nature's devastating power. Elephants that survived moved slowly, their eyes filled with confusion and quiet sorrow. Bodies of fallen trees and debris littered the plains, a haunting reminder of the morning's chaos. The air smelled of salt and earth, heavy with the cries of animals and the roar of receding waves. Villagers brought food and water to stranded elephants, tending gently to the injured and weak. Some young calves huddled with older elephants, finding comfort despite the overwhelming fear. The herd eventually regrouped, moving cautiously across terrain reshaped by the tsunami's force. 19. Emotional impact on witnesses. Those who saw the event unfold carried images of destruction and suffering that never left their mind. Children who once watched elephants play now spoke in hushed tones about the tragedy they had seen. Many people admitted they could not sleep without hearing the cries of elephants in their thoughts. The loss reminded everyone of the fragile balance between nature and the lives it nurtures daily. Some felt guilt, wondering if better preparations could have saved more elephants from the disaster. Artists wrote songs, painted images, and told stories to honor the elephants and raise awareness. Teachers shared the event in classrooms, urging children to respect nature and protect its creatures. The memory of the tsunami became a shared wound that shaped how the community viewed wildlife care. It sparked a deeper bond between humans and elephants, built on grief, compassion, and shared survival. Massive waves rose from the distant ocean, dark and roaring as they approached the coastal plains. Herds of elephants grazed unaware, their massive forms silhouetted against the early morning sun. The ground trembled as the first wave crashed, sending sprays of water high into the salty air. Elephants trumpeted in alarm, their calls echoing across the beach as panic rippled through the herd. Mothers tried to shield their young, forming protective circles as the water surged closer. Some were swept away instantly, struggling against the relentless pull of the tide with futile strength. Trees were uprooted and debris carried in torrents, creating obstacles that tore at frightened animals. Villagers watched helplessly from high ground, hearts heavy at the chaos unfolding below. Survivors huddled on higher land, drenched and trembling, while the herd's cries faded into distance. 20. Lessons for the future. The disaster taught people and conservationists to prepare for such rare but deadly events in advance. Plans were made to create early warning systems that would alert communities and wildlife areas faster. Rescue equipment and trained teams would be stationed in high-risk zones for rapid action if needed. Paths leading to higher safe grounds for elephants were marked and cleared for easy escape routes. Habitat restoration became a priority with stronger designs to resist flooding and wave damage. Governments promised to invest more in wildlife protection as part of broader disaster readiness plans. Communities learned that saving wildlife was also saving their environment and shared future. Scientists studied the tsunami's effects to create better strategies for protecting large mammals. The tragedy became a reminder that preparation and unity can reduce losses when nature strikes again. In the aftermath, the land was littered with debris and memories of a terrible day. Elephants that survived wandered aimlessly, searching for lost members of their herds. Communities came together to rebuild not just homes but hope for the future. Wildlife groups worked tirelessly to nurse rescued elephants back to health. The event sparked conversations about disaster preparedness for animals and humans. Like and subscribe to hear more real stories of courage and survival in nature's trials. Share your thoughts in the comments about how we can protect wildlife in disasters. Thanks for watching and remembering the lives touched by this heartbreaking event. Let this story inspire action to safeguard both people and animals from future tragedies. Nature's power is vast, but our compassion can be just as strong when we stand united.